My panel joins me now in the arena. White House correspondent for Bloomberg News, Catherine Lucy, CNN Chief National Affairs correspondent, Jeff Zeleny, CNN political commentator, Ashley Allison, and former Chief of Staff to Vice President Mike Pence, Marc Short. I want to start with something we heard earlier from Senator Ted Cruz this morning, who was making a point kind of about the moment that we're in right now. Take a listen.
I think this is not a time for partisan finger pointing and attacks. Now, after we come through search and rescue, after we come through the process of rebuilding, there will naturally be a period of retrospection where you look back and say, okay, what exactly transpired? What was the timeline? And what could have been done differently to prevent this loss of life? And that's a natural process. I think it should not happen in a bitter and partisan sense, but it should happen in a reasonable sense of saying, what lessons can we learn?
Jeff, I think it's an important point, a valid point, one I wish everyone would always follow in these moments, and oftentimes, depending on which party is in which place, they don't necessarily do so. But how's the White House preparing for what the senator is talking about? The next steps here, there are going to be questions asked, and they're going to be tough questions.
There are tough questions, and this is an example of what every White House goes through, as Marc well knows. I mean, it's the things that are not expected, that are sort of outside your immediate control, that really test an administration. And I think what the press secretary there, in a sort of half answer to Kristen Holmes's question was, she said, whether it's states or a federal government, that's a policy discussion to have. And that is probably true. But if you talk to Republican governors and you talk to sort of Republicans out in the country, they're beginning to get sort of worried about all of the things that are being handed off onto the states. If it's food assistance or Medicaid spending, and now the potential of storm management. States are not equipped, by and large, to handle something like this. So I think from a political matter, it will be fascinating to see what Republicans in Texas sort of say about this FEMA matter. But in a more urgent concern, I think the question of readiness is a very good one across the government writ large. I've talked to Republican officials from the Bush administration, Democratic ones from the Obama administration, the Biden administration, the first Trump administration. There is a concern really throughout the ranks of officials. Is there a readiness issue because of DOJ? And I don't think we know the answer to that yet, but that is a question this administration should be asking.
Marc, what is the balance for Republicans on this? I often found myself on Capitol Hill. There are a lot of Republicans who really hated government assistance or disliked it, disagreed with it ideologically until their state got hit by a natural disaster, sure, where the government has a very clear, I think, an understood role. And then all of a sudden they're lobbying as hard as they possibly can for the money, understandably so. What's the balance there?
Well, I think that typically the state and local response is what is driving the response in the first 48 to 72 hours. Then FEMA comes in and supports that. And so typically where you see members of Congress, potentially Republicans who normally would be supportive of cuts, wanting to get additional funding, is in the aftermath to get funding that provides support for the victims. But what happens in the immediate aftermath of a tragedy like this really is state and local response. And even FEMA will tell you that before they come in 72 hours later.
Both to that point, Ashley, but also I think the question about DOJ cuts, there aren't really solid answers yet. There's a lot of, I think, a lot of curiosity, a lot of concern, but nothing that's explicitly saying National Weather Service should have had X, Y, or Z that they did not have. Yeah. People are investigating. There's no question about it. How do Democrats manage this? Because there have been some very explicit, this is why this happened.
Well, I mean, first, this is a tragedy, regardless. The people who are victims of this flood, we don't know their political identification, and guess what? The water did not care. So tragedy strikes. I think the thing about a couple pieces. One, DOJ did make cuts to FEMA. They did make cuts to the Weather Service. And so that might have, the people who have victims of this, their families might have questions. And other people across the country that live on flood lines, they too may have questions for future. The thing about FEMA is there was a bill that just passed that has $646 million in cuts to FEMA for the future. We're talking about things that have already been cut. Ted Cruz voted for that bill. So $640 million are no longer going to be allocated to citizens in this country when natural disasters happen. What do you do about that? The reality is when the cameras leave this area in Texas, there will be years of rebuilding. I was talking to people who are still struggling in Altadena last week. We've stopped covering that, but the tragedies don't end. And so that is why Democrats have often said we need these funds. I agree. I don't think we should make this political. But when the review happens, it needs to be honest, it needs to be thorough, and people need to be held accountable if DOJ did play a role in it.
Altadena, Western North Carolina, certainly
Everywhere,
after Hurricane Helene. Catherine, building up Jeff's point, in terms of readiness for government, readiness in the federal government at this point in time, what are you hearing? Because there's been a lot, without any question, over the course of the last 7 months.
No, we've seen a huge amount of change since President Trump came into office. And I think on some of the specific pieces around readiness, you have heard questions from lawmakers in both parties, right? So the Commerce Secretary, when he was on the Hill recently doing hearings about their budget, which includes the Weather Service, members from both parties were asking what was happening, would there be staffing in certain locations? So I think people are watching. There are aspects of this that are not partisan. When you're in a small location, a rural area, you're wondering what kinds of resources you're going to have. And so I think those questions are going to keep coming up. And I agree, there have not been full reviews yet. We are still in the middle of this. We have to see how this all sort of is assessed and unfolds. But I think there are people who are watching this.
Go ahead. Yeah,
well, I think that there will be legitimate questions, but even the National Weather Service is not going to be fans of the cuts the administration proposed. But even the National Weather Service said that in the New Braunfels office that normally staffed by 2 people, they had 5 people, and that every alert was provided. I think that when you have a flood of rising 26 feet in less than 2 hours in the middle of the night, I mean, this is one of those tragedies I think is really going to be hard. And Psalms remind us that God is close to the brokenhearted, and we should be praying for mercy and comfort for those families in ways that only He can give. But there's true that there will be a time for this, but I also don't think this is a good example for Democrats to use. I think the reality is that even the National Weather Service said that they were fully staffed in this case.
But the question, I guess, in future storms is the hurricane season just begins. I mean, is this if you were sitting in the White House right now, would this be a moment to go, we better check to make sure that, that there aren't some readiness issues there. They don't know necessarily what DOJ did. It's a little bit of a mystery there. So that's my question.
Yeah, Jeff, I think that's a great question. I question that there really were cuts that impacted this, but you're right. There's going to be extra scrutiny for as we enter the hurricane season. The administration will want to be prepared for
But the hurricanes are going to be stronger. The floods rise that fast because our climate is changing. And this is also the party that wants to roll back all the clean energy cuts. The Weather Service might not have changed the outcome of this, but things don't happen in isolation and there's compounding effects. So will the hurricanes be stronger this season? Have we ever seen a flood like this? I don't know. We need to ask why, and maybe it's climate change, and maybe we should address that, and it doesn't seem like currently this administration really wants to do that.
Yeah, well, certainly second to what Marc was saying, and I think there's a lot of questions that everybody's going to be walking through in the weeks and months ahead, but about the prayers and thoughts and significant concern with the families and the people on the ground in Central Texas in the Hill Country. My panel is back with me. Catherine, I want to start with you as our resident Bloomberger here, so you must know all the things about all the things.
Some of the things.
What's fascinating about this is if you look at the rates that are in the letters, there may be like a percentage point to 3 at most away from the original April 2nd tariffs. So I read the letters and I thought, this is essentially just an official delay of the deadline. Am I not seeing something?
They are not that different. I mean, this whole process has been deadlines and delays and a lot of confusion. And I think that's been very hard for countries that have been trying to negotiate these deals because they don't really know what is the real deadline, what isn't. It's interesting, I think, because the president pretty effectively weaponized using a deadline with Congress to get his legislation passed. But it has turned out that deadlines with foreign leaders who have a lot of other concerns about trade and the world economy have not been quite as moved by these deadlines. So now it looks like it's being pushed. This was after weeks of them saying they were about to announce deals with major, both the president and top officials were saying deals were coming with major trading partners. We were going to see up to a dozen deals. We haven't seen those yet. There's been a couple of deals, some of which we still haven't seen sort of full details on. And we certainly haven't gotten 90 deals in 90 days.
I mean, that was an attack on Peter Navarro, and I will not. That will not stand. And I'm kidding, but that was what he said initially. The rest of the administration has not said that since, but what they have said, to your point, is every single week, to an advisor, multiple deals are coming. 2 deals are coming by Friday. 3 deals are coming by Saturday. Explain to me why this is working out in the president's favor.
I mean, look, one thing I guess it's working out in the president's favor is the sky has not fallen in terms of higher prices. And that may be the bottom line of this. I'm thinking back to when Walmart said it was going to have to raise prices because of tariffs. The White House and the president in particular pushed back very hard on that, obviously sending a message to other business leaders and business owners. Not that it hasn't caused great consternation and pain, particularly for some small businesses. There's no doubt about that. But there has not been this broad sweeping price hike, and the market is only negatively reacting right now today. But for the last several weeks, it's been gangbusters. So I guess in that respect, it's been in the president's favor. But in terms of this being some grand strategy, even though we haven't heard the 90 deals, 90 days since then, that has been kind of the anthem and the theme. And it's sort of unclear what has been happening these last 90 days, because at the end of the day here, the president is effectively flipping the script a little bit.
Yeah, an implicit point to Wall Street traders, like, guys, nothing has changed. I don't know why you're reacting now. This has been the kind of the state of play. Mark, you've often been very helpful to me and kind of being clear-eyed about where things are versus where people are acting like they may be. What is the end game here? Is it... and I ask this seriously because if you're President Trump, you're saying we just brought in $80 billion in tariff revenue over the course of the last several months. All these countries are coming to me and saying market access and non-tariff barriers. And what do they want?
Well, keep in mind, $80 billion is paid by Americans. It's not paid by foreign governments. They're the ones that pay the tariff. The reality is that the July 9th date was not accidental. They wanted to get past the tax bill. The trade agenda was interfering with what they want to do domestically. And the administration is riding high. They've had a couple really great weeks between attack on Iran, between a great jobs report, and as Jeff said, there has been no inflation. But they also haven't been talking about tariffs for the last couple of months. And now they're basically reigniting that conversation. So it's no surprise that markets are down. And the reality is that many of the tariffs he announced previously were delayed. So we haven't seen the full impact. And many of our greatest and biggest retailers pre-purchased inventory with anticipation of the tariffs. That's going to run out in the second half of this year. So you're going to see price increases. You're going to continue to see a chaotic trade agenda. And, whereas Peter Navarro has been locked in a cage somewhere, not allowed to speak to the media, he'll be resurfacing. And so you're going to see more confusion and more chaos in the coverage of what they're doing with tariffs. And you're going to see, I think, more chaos in the markets.
Putting Peter Navarro aside for a second, for Democrats right now who struggle with the broader issue of tariffs, President Biden kept a lot of the first-term tariffs on. Mark's point about the chaos kind of, when you start talking about this again, they have an issue again. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly what he said. For the first time on national television, I agree with Mark Short. I think...
Not the first time.
Well, second.
It's not Scott Jennings.
Yeah, right. I think I agree with your point, though. So the numbers are down because the arrow, for people who don't follow the stock market, who are just like, what is happening? When the arrows are red, it's when Trump talks about tariffs. When the arrows are green, it's when Trump does a delay. And that has been the theme over and over. And this administration rides high. A couple weeks ago, the market was up. But there were other issues that brought it up. I think we have always projected that prices will start to really increase after Labor Day. And we never expected there to be 90 days. And you asked, what are they doing? Probably nothing. The deals were smoke and mirrors, hocus pocus. We've yet to see the deals. The impact has not really taken effect. But Americans will feel this. This is just basic economics. Prices are going to go up if these tariffs stay in place.
I will note, Treasury Secretary said 48 hours, many deals. Catherine Lucy has never heard that before in this administration.